Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the One and O podcast. I'm Joel Haas.
I'm Lexie Linderman.
And I'm Avery Hill.
Today, we're going to be covering some recent events regarding Penn State football, specifically some more EA Sports information. We got the team ratings, the player ratings, everything like that. The game's now available to play. If you order the early access, and by the time you're watching this, it's probably open to everybody. So we'll have that, and then also we're going to touch on the themed games for this season. Penn State released all the themes for its home games for the 2024 campaign, including the whiteout opponent. So we'll get into our thoughts on that. We can start with EA first. I know everyone's excited about the game dropping. Personally, I have not had a chance to play it yet. I'm in the process of acquiring a new console so that I can actually play the game. I'm trying to scam my, sorry, I'm trying to convince my friend into selling me his PlayStation 5 so that I can play the game. But I know, Avery, you got a chance to play it. So what were your first thoughts from the game?
My first thoughts from the game, well, first of all, it's probably at least on the PlayStation 5, easily the best game I've ever played. Like I honestly had to force myself to get off just to get on the podcast. I probably played at least came out at 4 o'clock yesterday, probably about 12, 15 hours of it. Like overall, the game is just probably my favorite game that I've played. I mean, the dynasty mode is very deep and it has so many chances to do, so many different things if you want to be a recruiter and kind of try to get those bigger recruits. And of course, it's not going to come immediately. Like I had a challenge. Obviously, I'm using Old Dominion as I told y'all in previous episodes. We started off as a 1-star program. I will say that we won 10 games in the first season and we're now a 2-star program. We pulled in a 4-star. We almost had a couple other 4-star cornerbacks in the transfer portal, but we just don't have the NIL. It's hard. It's hard, man. We're working, but overall, I do think it's a really good game, and I'm really excited to see what else I discover in these hours that I continue to play.
Yeah, I mean, that might be the toughest team you could pick to do a rebuild. I just remember a couple years ago seeing pictures of like the state of their locker room, just how bad it looked compared to most of the other schools,
We
especially a
got our
school like.
facilities. Yeah, our facilities I think might be a D minus, but I'm working on. I have the coaching prestige. I know how to, recruit in the pipeline. My coach, he's from South Florida, so he's getting the Florida guys, but it's also Old Dominion, so you're getting guys from Virginia, from Maryland, things like that. But again, we're working. I just got a 4-star tight end, and he's the truth. Like let's say George Kittle. That's all I'm gonna say.
Nice. Yeah, I think it was like either 2021 or 2022 when they played Virginia Tech, and the Hokies coaching staff got stuck in their elevator, like going up to the press box. They had to like delay the second half of the game or something like that.
Yep.
So
And who won
yeah,
the game?
yeah, they did win that game.
Yep.
Old Dominion won that game.
That's
So
our highlight in the last forever.
yeah, you got your work cut out for you there. But we also got to see Penn State's players, and we're not even going to touch on the way they look in the game because I know a lot of the players had issues with the ways that they were portrayed. I think Kevin Winston Jr. was actually bald in the game, and we got to see him this summer, and he was not in fact bald in person. So unless he changed that in the last couple months, they might want to fix that in a future update. But we did get to see player rankings dropped. So the top player for Penn State actually was KJ Winston, 91 overall, Nick Singleton, and Abdul Carter also 91. We knew that after EA dropped its list of top 100 players. Those three all made it. But you dig a little bit deeper, Tyler Warren, next up, 90 overall. Drew Allers an 88. Katron Allen comes in at 87, which is interesting because people were kind of looking around when we saw Singleton making that list of top 100. I think he was in the 50s or 60s as a 91 overall. And then Katron Allen wasn't on that list of top 100, despite having a better season than Singleton last year. But yeah, he comes in with an 87, not too far behind, I guess. And still one of the top rankings on team. Denai Dennis Sutton's up there as well. He'll be moving into a starting role, at least we expect this season. Stout Wormley surprised me a little bit with how high he was. And then as far as wide receivers go, Julian Fleming comes in at 83. That was the highest for the wide receivers. But obviously you guys got to look at the rankings. What did you kind of see or what stood out to you?
I think they're kind of sleeping on a couple guys. Like I think Julian Fleming being above Harrison Wallace the third is a little bit surprising just because Franklin said all offseason that they're super excited to see him on the field this upcoming year. So I wouldn't be surprised if Wallace ends up passing Fleming as the season goes on. And I think Deny is a little bit low at 85. I think that now in a starting role, he's definitely going to prove that he should be higher. I mean, I think he's going to end up being one of the best defensive ends in the country. And I also think Drew's about right. You could argue a little bit lower, but I think 88's pretty much his ceiling there. And I think Katron's just a little bit low just because Singleton's a 91. I think Katron should be about 88, 89, even 90. But other than that, I think they did a pretty good job. Most Penn State's players are rated pretty accurately.
Yeah, and I think going off of that, especially with the running backs, I do think, especially playing the game, that they took more of an emphasis on like athleticism, especially because in my first game, I got burned by 99 speed, 99 acceleration, Nick Harbor, even though, I don't think he had maybe 4 catches last year. I think athleticism is a really big, I guess, selling point for the game. So I guess it makes sense. But even if you look at last season, I mean, I would argue that Katron Allen was the better running back. So the fact that he's 4 overalls below is kind of confusing. But I will also say something that did stand out to me was the tight ends. I mean, obviously you had Tyler Warren at 90 overall, but you had Luke Reynolds, the freshman, at 79, which is a very strong starting point for a freshman, which goes to show just the upside that he must have and how highly regarded he's is in the college football world. And even with Cooper Cousins, I think he's a 76, right under Nick Dawkins at a 77, and we can certainly expect him to take a boost if he ends up getting substantial playing time this year. So I did think it was interesting to see how they rated some of the freshmen across the roster.
Yeah, and same thing with the transfers as well. Like AJ Harris has gotten a lot of buzz coming into Penn State. Highly rated 4-star who went to Georgia and burned his red shirt last season. He appeared in 7 games, didn't start any of them, so I think that's what's holding him back is he doesn't have necessarily enough on film right now. But anytime you can play in 7 games as a true freshman at Georgia, you're probably pretty good. And Penn State has the track record at cornerback where you can feel pretty confident that he's going to develop into a star at the position here with Penn State. So I thought he was a little bit low on their rankings. But again, I guess he doesn't, have enough on film at the moment for them to really put him any higher than he was. So he's right there next to Candler in the rankings as Penn State's cornerback projected starting cornerbacks. Um, and with Penn State bringing in new offensive coordinator Andy Kotelnicki for his first year, Avery got a chance to kind of break down his film at Kansas, see what he was able to do well, how he was able to turn that offense into a pretty explosive offense, especially considering the talent level that you have with a team like Kansas, recruiting probably in the 50s and 60s nationally. And obviously, he was able to do some pretty creative things over there. He'll be bringing that offense over to Penn State. I know Avery got to kind of take a look at that, break that down, gotten a chance to play with Penn State's offense now in EA College Football 25. So Avery, what have you seen from Kotelnicki in his scheme?
Yeah, I mean, with Kodenik in his scheme, I mean, the first thing that stands out is that he's creative. Again, you mentioned it. Like, I mean, if I didn't know him and I just seen his offense, I would think that he's a genius. I don't know, like, I don't know his IQ. I don't know any of that, but he seems like a genius. I mean, he uses motion a lot. I think they're one of the highest motion team when he was at Kansas, one of the highest, motion using teams in the country. I mean, he loves to get his playmakers the ball in space. I mean, he had Devin Neal again. He had what 1,600 yards, 12 touchdowns, and he found a way to get him the ball, whether it was a direct snap, an end around, sweeps, different any type of play that he can do to get Devin Neal the ball in space. It was very interesting to see. And then even like with him being a tight end guy, I mean, you think about Tyler Warren, like at Kansas, he only had Mason Fairchild. Mason Fairchild, he's a decent tight end. He's 6'6", which helps his case, but he's nothing crazy. I don't think that he stacks up with Tyler Warren. So I think the opportunity for Tyler Warren is really big to just get a chance to get the ball. I mean, I could see him being hit up in the scenes for easy completions, and I think it'll make Penn State's offense much better and much less predictable than last year. I mean, with those motions, he's kind of keeping the defense on their toes, whether it's just splitting the field or getting guys to get to the other side so you can run the ball in the opposite direction. He's always finding ways to really confuse the defense, and obviously if Penn State is able to buy in and understand what he has going on, it'll be really big. But going on with the game, I think the game they obviously aren't. They don't know what Koenig is going to do at Penn State. Honestly, we don't really know what he's going to do. I mean, we can kind of guess based off what he's done in the past and what Penn State does, but they didn't really have too much of what he does. It kind of looked more like Penn State's offense last year, which honestly gave me fits when I played with Penn State. I really couldn't get any yards, and it's not my fault. I really blame the playbook. They did have the T formation, which really worked out on my end when I needed them, maybe a goal line play, things like that. But overall, they didn't have too much. And it's kind of the same with the defense. They ran a 4-3 in the game. Obviously, they're a 4-2-5, but you can change that in the game. And I'm assuming they'll end up updating that when the game comes.
So Penn State's still a very frustrating offense in the game as well. If you're looking for an explosive, fun offense, maybe go with Kansas. If you plan on coaching in the game, or Old Dominion if you want to be like Avery and you want to work on a rebuild. But that might
I'm
be a
doing
long
something great.
process.
I'm doing something great. We're building something great. I mean, we have a lot going for us. Just come ball down south. Come on.
But we can move on to the home game themes for Penn State, which came out this week. Most importantly, the whiteout, the opponent for that game will be Washington. Um, so, it'll be Washington's first time experiencing a whiteout, obviously, joining the Big Ten this season. And that game will actually be in November 9th, I believe, which is only the second time Penn State will play a whiteout game in November. So it'll definitely be colder than normal. We also had a video come out from Christian Hackenberg saying that the game would be at 3:30 on CBS. And then he kind of backpedaled a little bit. And I saw that he replied to another tweet and said that that was just his guess and it hasn't been finalized. So I don't know why he put out the video in the first place. But so it may or may not be at 3:30. And then I think Audrey Snyder with The Athletic put out a tweet that said it's either 3:30 or 7 per her source. So we know it won't be a noon game. It'll probably be a 3:30 game, but I guess there's still a chance it'll be a 7 o'clock game. I don't know. I'm gonna operate under the assumption it'll be a 3:30 game just because it's in November and the Big Ten typically stays away from night games. Those are kind of tricky to set up in November. I think you have to get the road team to agree to it, and I don't think Washington's going to do that for a while because why would they? But yeah, I mean, what are your guys' thoughts on Washington coming in for the whiteout?
I honestly think it's a pretty good pick for Penn State. I mean, I don't think it was ever going to be Ohio State, and I don't think it was ever going to be UCLA just because of noon kickoffs and everything like that. But I think they picked a good game because obviously Washington made the national championship last year. It's their first time playing in Beaver Stadium, and it's two programs that have honestly kind of been at the top these past couple of years of a good amount. So I think it's a pretty good pick because it gives the hype, but Washington's not going to be as good as last year. Obviously, they lost a bunch of guys to the NFL. But it's going to be a winnable game for Penn State. It's also going to be a very hyped up game for Penn State. I think with the 3:30 start, obviously, I think Washington has a short week playing at Rutgers, so it's definitely not going to be a 7. There's no way they're going to agree to that. But I think 3:30 is going to be good because it's after daylight saving, so it's going to get dark pretty early. So you are going to get the atmosphere anyway. So I think it's a pretty good pick for Penn State based on the options they were given.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it was just best case scenario for Penn State, as you said. Obviously, if it is a 3:30 game, it's still basically a night game. You give it 30 minutes and it'll be pitch black out there. Like that's what happens after daylight saving time. And I also think with Washington having that prestige of just being in the national championship, no matter how good they are this year, I think that it'll be something that they're looking forward to. And I do think that by the time we get to November 9th, Washington won't be at the top of anyone's rankings, but I do think it's an important school, especially given it's their first time in Beaver Stadium, and it gives something new for Penn State fans to look forward to. And if it works out, you could possibly see some bigger opponents to have a, November night whiteout game, even if it is 3:30 in the future.
Some of the other bigger themes include the helmet stripe game, which will be in its third year this season. It was kind of introduced as a way to have a whiteout that's not really a whiteout. I think it was the first year was 2022, and they had like two big games. I forget exactly what they were. I think it was like Auburn and Michigan, and they couldn't decide which one to do, so they did the helmet stripe as like a second whiteout, and James Franklin has called it the sneaky whiteout. And they're going to use that for the Ohio State matchup, which I think is a solid choice because that's probably your second best environment atmosphere that you're going to get. Again, it's basically a whiteout. And I think just based on my personal experience, it's been just as loud of an environment at the helmet stripe game compared to a whiteout. So I think that's a reasonable choice, obviously, against probably the toughest opponent you're going to face all year. And then also the UCLA game, another probably the second or third biggest home game. And that one's going to be the Stripe Out game, which is another fun one for fans. Looks great on TV and everything like that. But were you guys okay with those decisions as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think just as you said, like those are the three biggest or the three most important teams, and you kind of pick the best case scenario for each team. Obviously, as we said, Ohio State as a whiteout wasn't a realistic option. So let's take the sneaky whiteout and make it, basically a whiteout. That's the best case scenario for Ohio State. And you could argue that UCLA would be what, the third or maybe fourth. I don't really see any tough competition beating them out for a home game, looking at what Penn State has on their schedule. So I think a good scenario for them is to go with the stripe out. And then, of course, you choose your whiteout. You still get that cold, November again. It'll still end up being a night game. I think all three games were picked with the best case scenario in mind, and it all worked out.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think the helmet stripe is kind of perfect for Ohio State because at least experiencing last year, with Michigan being the stripe out, it was still just as loud as the whiteout, in my opinion, just because of the opponent. So I think the fans are gonna bring it no matter what, just because it is Ohio State. So I think they did a good job picking the Ohio State theme because, like we said, it was never gonna be the whiteout. And I think for UCLA, stripe out's gonna be good. Like Avery said, one of the more hyped home games, probably the third most hyped home game. So you give the third favorite theme, whatever, with the stripe out. So I think they did a good job picking those, and their three most hyped up home games have the three best themes. So
Yeah. Just to kind of round it out, the other home games include Dawn game against Bowling Green and then Military Appreciation against Kent State. Illinois is the homecoming game, which we actually knew previously. I think the homecoming committee announced that like a month or two ago. And then the last home game of the season against Maryland is obviously going to be Senior Day. Those are all kind of smaller events. You don't really have to wear anything special for those unless you're in that little student section or S zone, I should say. But yeah, I mean the three biggest themes went to the three biggest games like we expected. It was just kind of deciding, who was going to get the white out and who was going to get, the stripe out and the helmet stripe game. But yeah, it lands with Washington, which again you guys kind of touched on. I think it's a pretty good choice given the circumstances. Again, it'll be a later point in the year, being in November, so it'll be colder. I saw people on Twitter saying, someone has to tell the Boomers to get white jackets for that game. Someone has to let them know. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think, the environment will be as good as ever against a new opponent. And I'm sure a lot of Washington fans will want to be making the trip for the first time playing at Beaver Stadium in their team's history. And Penn State, getting to host them obviously for the first time. They've played a few times previously. I think it's three previous matchups, and Penn State's 3-0 all time, but they'll look to continue that streak with the whiteout against a team that, obviously appeared in the national championship game last season.
Now I will say though, just I am glad, with as a spectator looking at the theme games that it wasn't like a Bowling Green. Like I don't really think anyone would want to see that, and I don't think that the whiteout would even, have the numbers that it has, even with it being the whiteout if you play Bowling Green or even Kent State, or hey, let's throw in Illinois too. I didn't want to see that. So
Yeah, there was some talk about Illinois potentially being the whiteout this year. So I think we can all agree we're glad that it's not Illinois, even though there is a little bit of bad blood there, just given the last time Illinois came to Happy Valley with the I think 9 overtime game. So there is still a little bit of kind of hatred there. I think the team does want to win this one. But yeah, I don't think it's enough juice to really warrant a whiteout, even though we did hear a little bit of talk about that potentially being the case, just because of kind of when it lined up in the season, with the potential for it to be a night game and everything like that. But yeah, I think Penn State gets kind of the best of both worlds. You're not going to have a noon game. You're most likely not going to have a night game either. But you know what? A 3:30 kick in November, that's basically a night game. At Penn State, it's probably going to be dark by halftime. So you'll still get kind of that night game atmosphere, especially toward the end of the game, which might be when it's the most important. If it's a close game, you're going to want that toward the end there to kind of help you pull that one out if it's tight down the stretch. But yeah, so Penn State finalizes those themes for this season. And I think all things considered, they did a pretty solid job of just deciding, taking everything into consideration. Obviously, with the network contracts being what they are, you're never going to get, the perfect pick where I think everyone would have wanted an Ohio State whiteout. But, helmet stripe game, pretty close second there. That's it for today's episode of the One and Know podcast. Thank you guys for watching. For more football content, you can find us at psucollegian.com and follow us on socials.